Hello everyone, my name is Xiomaro and welcome back to the channel. So today I want to talk about Elder Scrolls Online. Something I've mentioned on this channel before, despite it being set up for a MOBA slash totally not a MOBA game, aka Battle Right, is that my first love was first-person shooters, and I still love playing first-person shooters to this day. But something I don't think I've mentioned is how much I used to play MMOs. There was a long period of time where I completely dropped FPS games in favor of MMOs, and I've been playing them since the fairly early days. I wasn't around for the first wave of MMOs like EverQuest and Ultima Online, although I have actually played those games, but I did start playing MMOs a little before World of Warcraft came out. Anarchy Online was actually my first MMO, but Star Wars Galaxies was the game that got me hooked on them. I played that game a lot, all the way up until they killed the combat in 2005. I totally missed the early days of vanilla WoW because I only really cared about Star Wars Galaxies. But after the developers messed the game up big time, I spent years hopping from MMO to MMO. From 2005 to, I don't know, maybe 2011, I played basically every alpha and beta I could. So needless to say, I played a lot of MMOs. There was some good ones along the way that stood out in one way or another, at least to me, such as Guild Wars 1, City of Villains, and of course, WoW. But the vast majorities of MMOs back then and to this day suck. Needless to say, I got pretty burnt out on MMOs and I can probably call myself a hardened veteran. What's the point of me telling you all this? Well, when I played in the beta for Elder Scrolls Online back in 2013 or whenever it was, I thought the game sucked, and honestly, it kind of did. And I say that as a big fan of the Elder Scrolls series. It felt bland, the combat felt kind of loose, and most importantly, it just didn't feel like an Elder Scrolls game to me. So I just gave the game a hard pass. And in my experience, MMOs that start bad, or at least mediocre, usually have nowhere to go but down. So I never looked at the game again. But over time, I kept hearing more and more good things about it, and another thing you need to know about me is I'm incredibly stubborn. So I just never gave the game a second look until a couple of weeks ago. A friend of mine started playing the game after seeing how good the game looked when a few streamers were playing it, so I reluctantly bought the game expecting utter disappointment. But I'm happy to say that I was pretty wrong. I've honestly never seen a game do such a 180. And yes, I know some of this stuff I'm about to mention was implemented a long time ago, but stubborn old Zio just didn't know and didn't care until a couple of weeks ago. So I'm comparing things from what ESO was in 2013 to what it is in 2019. I'm going to be totally honest, I started out by creating a character with very little care for it because I fully expected to be dropping the game within a couple of weeks. But literally 3 or 4 hours into it, I ended up deleting my first character because I realized this is a game that I could easily get into, and I'd rather do a bit more research if I'm going to be investing some time into it. Literally an hour or two into playing the game, my reaction was, holy shit, this actually feels like an Elder Scrolls game now. The content is no longer locked behind a level gate, so straight out of the tutorial you can go almost anywhere you like and start doing some really epic quests. None of that,
"Hey Zio, my chickens are getting eaten by wolves. Wanna go kill some and I'll give you some silver?"
No, in ESO, if you want to go straight to the Gold Coast and start murdering people for the Dark Brotherhood, you can totally do that. And speaking of the Dark Brotherhood, that involves, well, as I already mentioned, murdering people. In most MMOs, that would involve killing a named NPC and then maybe a scripted battle with the guards if you were supposed to be caught. But in ESO, there's a whole sneak system to avoid getting caught, and if you do get caught murdering innocents, you're going to end up with a bounty and chased by the town guards. The same applies to stealing and pickpocketing, and another thing you couldn't do back in the beta. You can make some really decent money actually just breaking into people's houses, stealing their stuff and then selling it to a fence who you'll find in the sewers of most cities. Another cool feature is the fact that you can go into first person now while you're exploring something for the first time. Honestly, it doesn't work very well in combat, but it's really nice to experience some things through your character's eyes. And of course, I need to mention the relatively open class and skill system. There are now 6 classes to choose from, and while they do add some uniqueness and flavor to your character, you're totally free to use whatever armor and weapons you like. If you're a Nightblade, a generally roguey type class, you're not locked into the cloak and dagger style of gameplay. You can be a Nightblade healer who wears robes if you really want to be. A good example actually is my character, Chubs. Yeah, Xiomaro was taken. I'm an orc sorcerer and I'm playing it as a melee class in medium or heavy armor. Oh, and I'm a werewolf. And actually, that's yet another cool addition that makes the game feel so much more like an Elder Scrolls game. You can actually be a vampire or werewolf now, and they feel really powerful, albeit with some downsides. The class system isn't quite as open-ended as the single-player games in the series, but there had to be some compromises in an MMO. So you add together the fact that you can go explore just about anywhere in the world straight out of the gate, the fact you can steal, pickpocket, and even murder NPCs in the world, the first-person view, and the relatively open class system, and suddenly you have an MMO that actually feels like an Elder Scrolls game. I know that I've jumped on the bandwagon pretty late, but I've also joined at a really good time. A brand new expansion, or chapter as they're called in ESO, just dropped on PC, and it'll be coming to consoles in a couple of weeks. So if you're like me and you've never played the game before, or you've been even slightly curious, now is a really good time to check it out. ESO is also one of the few games that's actually been steadily growing in player numbers over the past couple of years, and that's something that's incredibly rare, especially after, in my opinion, such a mediocre start. I've only mentioned the stuff that I'm excited about, but the game has a lot to offer for other types of players too. So let's give you a quick rundown for each kind of player. For the PvE players, you have a lot of content aimed at you. Lots of fully voice acted and very well written quests, lots of soloable but challenging content, veteran versions of the content which is similar to WoW's heroic dungeons, and later on you'll have the trials to look forward to, which is kind of like ESO's raid content. And you even have the Maelstrom arena, which is some challenging solo content that gives endgame gear. Honestly, it seems like the vast majority of the game is soloable, which is great for casual players, but there's a really good helping of challenging group and solo content for people who like a challenge too. For PvP players, you have the Battlegrounds, which, to be honest, I would say is more similar to Guild Wars 2 PvP than WoW's Battlegrounds. You have things like Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, and Domination game modes, and the unique thing with ESO is the fact that every Battleground has 3 teams, which adds an interesting dynamic to the whole thing. But if organized PvP isn't for you, there's also a whole open world PvP zone. I haven't actually tried it out yet, so I can't really comment on how good it is, but even if I had played it, I'm probably not the best person to ask, because I generally dislike Zerg versus Zerg PvP, which open world stuff usually incentivizes. I know there are a lot of people out there who really enjoy that kind of content though, so if you're one of those people, feel free to weigh in down in the comments. You'll probably give a better overview than I could currently. For explorers, you have an absolutely huge amount of ground to explore. Elder Scrolls games have always had a great attention to detail and lore, and ESO doesn't disappoint in that regard. Honestly, I think the game world is probably the best part of ESO. I'm not generally an explorer kind of guy, but even I have been enjoying going into first person and just taking my time to look around. For the role players, honestly, this is one of the best games for it that I've seen in a while. It doesn't have the open world housing like Arcade and a few others, something that I know role players really go for, but it does still have a decent instanced housing system. However, the real draw is the fact that you can actually be a bad guy in this game, or whatever kind of character type you want to be. And one of my favorite things, on top of the usual costumes you get in most games, there's also a personality that you can equip. This affects your character's idle stance, running and walking style, it alters some of the emotes you can use, and probably a few other things too. I know there aren't a hell of a lot of you out there, but if you're into roleplay and that kind of stuff, this game is actually really great for it. And finally, for the crafters and traders, you have a really great crafting system to look forward to. Some of the best endgame gear is actually crafted by the looks of things, and there's a decent amount of stuff you can customize when you make it. So you can make gear for all kinds of things. Leveling gear, soloing gear, PvP gear, and all sorts of stuff. You can really customize stuff to whatever you need. And on top of that, the game doesn't actually have a global auction house, and instead uses these NPCs called guild traders. I don't fully know the ins and outs of them yet, but long story short, trading is controlled mostly by guilds. Guilds can have their own guild store, which works much like an auction house in other games, but only guild members can put stuff up for sale on the guild store, and by default only guild members can buy from it. But in every settlement there are guild traders who can be bid on by the guilds themselves, so when a guild owns them, it opens up the guild store to the general public. It's a very interesting system that I don't fully understand yet, but it essentially puts the economy in the player's hands way more than most MMOs. Anyway, a lot of this stuff might be old news to some of you, but maybe there are others like me who either haven't tried the game yet or tried it a while ago and didn't like what they saw. If you haven't played the game before or it's been a while since you last played it, I would definitely recommend at least giving it a try. I'll follow this video up with a few beginner's guides because while I'm still new to the game, I feel like there's a bunch of info I can put together for you guys to make it easier to learn the game. So stay tuned for that in the coming days. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please feel free to subscribe for more gaming guides, news and discussion. And don't forget to check out the links below to Patreon, Discord and Twitch. Until next time, thank you for watching and I'll see you soon.